I was barely 13 years old when the man everyone in our little southern town worshipped, my own father, crossed a line no daughter should ever even imagine. Folks knew him as Mr. Raymond Carter, the man with the spotless reputation, the friendly handshake, the Sunday church smile. But behind closed doors, he was a storm nobody else saw brewing. But believe it or not, that wasn't even the worst part. The real nightmare showed up years later, when I was 17. And I caught him quietly creeping toward the small bedroom where my baby sister, 6-year-old Lily, was fast asleep. That's the night something inside me snapped clean in half. I didn't get angry. Not the shouting kind. No. What hit me was cold, steady, bone-deep certainty, like icy water sliding straight down my spine. I realized right then that our lives were headed toward a point where either he went or Lily's innocence would. And after everything I had already survived, I knew the world wouldn't weep for the man who called himself my father. By the way, the name's Eleanora May Carter. The most folks around my neighborhood, down here in Savannah, Georgia, call me Miss Nora. I'm 84 now, older than I ever thought I'd live to be. Some years I'd burn out of my memory if I could. Others I hold tight like precious keepsakes. These days, I live in a small but cozy house I earned with my own blistered hands. I've got a front porch with 2 rocking chairs, a garden full of herbs and wildflowers, and a peace I fought my whole life to get. And honey, if you're reading this, go on and drop your name in the comments. It warms my old heart imagining this voice of mine traveling to places my legs can't carry me anymore. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I barely recognize the girl I used to be. Instead, I see an old woman with silver hair, always tied up neat, wrinkled skin that's weathered a lifetime, and pale gray eyes I inherited from my mama. These hands of mine are veined and shaky now, but they've built a life out of nothing but grit. Life was ugly to me, but I learned not to be ugly back. I learned to survive, and I learned to speak up, finally, because silence only ever protects the monster, never the victims. And sweetheart, this story I'm about to tell you, I've kept it locked up for over 65 years. Before you judge what I eventually did, you need to hear exactly what pushed me there. Because monsters don't always hide under kids' beds. Sometimes they tuck those kids in at night. Growing up in Maple Ridge, Alabama, a tiny southern town where everybody knew everybody's business, except the business they should have known, life looked picture perfect from the outside. Folks waved from porches, kids played kickball in the dirt roads, and after Sunday service, the whole street smelled like fresh biscuits and fried chicken. But behind the polite smiles and yes ma'ams, that town hid secrets thicker than swamp fog. My father's general store, Carter's Trading Post, sat right on Main Street. It was the heartbeat of the town. Fresh produce piled high, canned peaches lining the shelves, sacks of flour stacked to the ceiling. People trusted my daddy with their groceries, their problems, even their money. They thought he was some kind of saint. At home, though, he was anything but. We lived right behind the store in a cramped little house with thin walls that didn't hide much. There were 3 of us girls, me, my middle sister Annie, who was 11 back then, and little Lily, just a toddler. My mama, bless her fragile heart, was always sick with what folks politely called nervous troubles. Looking back, I know it was heartbreak, exhaustion, and depression rolled into one. Some days, she'd hum softly while stirring a pot of stew. Other days, she couldn't even lift her head off the pillow long enough to say our names. She'd drift in and out, lost in some fog that medicine couldn't clear. And my father, well, he only played the loving husband when church people were around. From the time I was a kid, I learned the rules of our house real quick. Don't talk back. Don't ask too many questions. And whatever you do, don't upset Daddy. His temper was like a switch. You never knew when it'd flip. And when it did, everything around him shook. But before the darkness came, there were slivers of light. I remember sweeping the store floors barefoot, humming old gospel tunes while Daddy counted the day's earnings. I remember licking the bottom of Mama's pie pan when she had enough strength to bake. I remember Annie begging me to read her bedtime stories, even though I stumbled over half the words. Back then, I didn't know our world would soon spiral into something I wouldn't wish on anybody. I didn't know that Daddy's late-night drinking, his locked office door, and the way his eyes lingered too long were warning signs, signals of where the story was headed. And sweetheart, I didn't know that one day, all that fear would turn into something colder, something sharp, something determined. But we're not there yet. Before things truly shattered, there was one day, one small moment, that should have told me everything I needed to know about the man my father really was. And that moment, it marked the beginning of the end. Because the first time Daddy's hand landed on me in a way no father should ever touch his daughter, I realized monsters don't growl, they smile. The first warning sign didn't come with a scream or a bruise. It came quietly, so quietly that if I blinked, I might have missed it. I was just 13, still stuck between being a kid and trying real hard to act grown, especially with Mama in and out of her fog. That afternoon, I was in the store helping Daddy restock the shelves like I did most days after school. The sun was setting, that soft orange glow slipping in between the dusty windows, making everything look warmer than it actually was. Daddy liked to close up early on Thursdays, said it gave him time to count the day's blessings. Back then, I thought he meant money. Now I know he meant something darker. I was kneeling on the floor, stacking canned peaches, when I felt his shadow fall over me. I looked up, expecting to see him pointing out something I'd done wrong. Instead, he was just staring. Too long, too still, too quiet. "You're growing fast, Nora," he said. I laughed nervously, brushing it off. Compliments from Daddy always felt like traps, little setups waiting for you to step wrong. Then, with no warning, he crouched down beside me and brushed a piece of hair behind my ear. My whole body stiffened. It wasn't the touch itself. It was the way he looked at me, like he was seeing something he shouldn't. I shifted back, pretending to reach for another can, but he caught my wrist gently, too gently for a man known for heavy hands. "You ain't scared of your old man, are you?" he asked, almost teasing. I forced a smile. "No, sir." But inside, I felt something cold stir. A feeling I didn't yet understand, but would soon know. "Good girl," he murmured as I finished the math. But instead of stepping back, he put his hands on my shoulders and slid them down my arms. I froze. My fingers went numb. My heartbeat felt loud enough to shake the shelves. When I finally stepped away fast, pretending I heard Mama calling, he didn't stop me. But the look he gave me said everything. That was the first time I felt true fear in my own home. Not the fear of getting yelled at or whipped for breaking a dish. This was fear that lived under your skin, fear that stayed even when the room went silent. And deep in my chest, I knew something was coming. Because the next time he put his hands on me, I wasn't lucky enough to slip away. After that first unsettling moment, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. I told myself Daddy was just tired, stressed, maybe drinking more than usual. I kept repeating excuses in my head, the way scared children do when the truth feels too big to face. But deep down, in that quiet place where instincts never lie, I knew something had shifted, and not in a way that could ever shift back. A week later, the night everything truly changed. The air felt weird from the moment I woke up, heavy, still, the kind of stillness right before a tornado touches down. Mama had one of her bad spells that day. She stayed in bed with the curtains closed, barely responding when I came in to check on her. Annie had gone to a friend's house for a sleepover, and little Lily was already down for the night, snoring softly in the crib we kept in Mama's room. That left just me and Daddy awake. He had been drinking. Anyone could tell by how slow he moved, how his voice dragged like his tongue was too heavy. But he wasn't sloppy drunk. No, this was the mean, controlled kind of drunk. The kind where he still knew exactly what he was doing. "Nora, come help me in the storeroom," he said, standing in the hallway with that empty look in his eyes. "We need to move some inventory before morning." Inventory? At 9:30 at night? I knew better, but refusing wasn't an option, not in his house. The storeroom was dim, lit only by a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. Boxes were stacked high, shadows stretching like long fingers across the walls. I kept my distance, grabbed a broom, pretended to sweep even though the floor was clean, anything to keep my hands busy. But he wasn't there to move boxes. He wasn't there for inventory. He walked behind me slow, steady, like he had all the time in the world. Then he took the broom from my hand and set it. "Nora," he said in a low voice, "you're old enough to understand a man's needs, and you're going to help your daddy the way you're supposed to." My stomach twisted. My knees went weak. I backed away until my spine hit a stack of boxes. "Daddy, no, please." But he didn't want to hear anything. He grabbed my wrist hard, so hard I felt the bones grind together, and pulled me toward him. His breath was hot against my ear. His free hand slid to my waist. I tried to twist away, tried to run, tried to scream, but he covered my mouth with one giant hand. "Shut up," he hissed. "You scream, and your mama'll hear, and she can't handle another damn thing. You want her to end up in a hospital? You want to break her?" He used my love for her like a weapon, and for the first time, I felt something darker than fear. That night, he didn't get as far as he wanted. I kicked him hard, right in the shin, and he stumbled, just enough for me to slip out of his grip and run upstairs. I locked myself in the bathroom, shaking so violently I couldn't even turn on the faucet. My face was wet. Tears or sweat, I couldn't tell. I sat on the cold tile floor until the sun came up. I didn't sleep. I didn't breathe proper. And I didn't feel safe in my own skin. But what I didn't know was he wasn't done. And the next time he cornered me, he made sure I couldn't escape. After that night in the storeroom, I walked around like somebody had unplugged the sun. I wasn't smiling, wasn't eating much, wasn't sleeping unless the chair was wedged under my bedroom door. I kept telling myself maybe I'd imagined how wrong everything felt. Maybe fear was making the shadows look bigger than they were. But deep in my gut, that quiet place where truth sits heavy, I knew better. Daddy wasn't done. And he acted normal. Too normal. Humming old Hank Williams songs, joking with customers, pretending to be proud of me for helping around the store. If someone looked at him from the outside, they'd think he was the perfect small-town father. But whenever it was just us in a room, his eyes would narrow in that way that made every nerve in my body tense. School became my only safe place. I lingered in hallways, volunteered for cleanup, took the long way home, anything to delay walking back into that house. My teachers noticed I was quieter than usual, but nobody pushed. Back then, adults didn't ask the hard questions. They looked at your clothes, your grades, your manners, and if all that looked fine, they assumed you were fine too. Mama caught on a little. One morning she brushed my hair and paused, her hand hovering like she wanted to ask something. But she didn't. Maybe she didn't have the strength. Maybe she didn't want to face another storm. She was breaking in slow motion, and Daddy used her fragility like a shield. One evening, about a week after the storeroom incident, I was washing dishes while Annie played on the living room floor. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears. Mama had gone to rest early, worn down from one of her crying spells. Lily was already asleep. hidden away in the soft baby breaths from her crib. Then I heard Dad's boots behind me, slow, heavy, purposeful. I didn't turn around, didn't want to see whatever expression he was wearing. "You're getting older, Nora," he said in that calm, controlling voice, "and I expect respect, total respect. You understand me?" My hands trembled under the running water. I nodded, even though I didn't trust my voice not to crack. He stepped closer, too close, and lowered his voice. "You keep pretending you don't hear me when I call for you. That stops now." His words weren't loud, but they felt like a lock clicking shut. I stepped away from the sink, trying to put space between us. He grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to remind me who he thought held the power in our house. "You listen when I speak. You come when I call, and you don't make me repeat myself." I yanked my hand back, heart pounding so fast I thought I might faint. For the first time, he realized I wasn't going to keep shrinking forever. Something in his eyes darkened, and just like that, I knew whatever he'd done before was only the beginning. He was testing how far he could push before I broke. And the night he finally decided to push past every boundary, someone else in that house saw it happen. In the days that followed, the house felt tight, like the walls themselves were leaning in, listening for the next whisper, waiting for the next crack in the foundation. Daddy walked around with that stiff, strained politeness that only I understood. To everyone else, Mama, Annie, the neighbors, he looked normal. But I saw the strain in his jaw, the twitch in his temple. He was irritated that I wasn't bending the way he wanted, that I wasn't falling into the exact mold he'd carved for me. He didn't like losing control, especially not to a girl he thought belonged under his thumb. I tried to shrink into the background, staying busy with chores, homework, and watching Lily. I kept Annie close whenever I could. Daddy didn't like doing anything when others were around, so having my sister by my side felt like a shield. But I couldn't keep her with me all the time. Life didn't work like that. One night, it was raining, one of those thick southern storms that makes the windows rattle and the lights flicker every few minutes. Mama had a horrible headache and stayed in bed with a cool cloth on her forehead. Lily was asleep in her crib, and Annie was coloring on the living room rug. I was in the hallway, putting towels in the linen closet when Daddy walked out of the bedroom. His steps were slow, deliberate. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me the way someone might stare at a locked door they're deciding whether or not to break down. "Come here," he said quietly. My stomach twisted. I'm putting these away," I answered, hoping he'd let it go. I said, "Come here." His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to make the hairs rise on my arms. I froze. Every instinct screamed no, but my feet felt stuck. And just when he stepped toward me, Annie rounded the corner. "Nora, can you help me find my blue crayon?" she asked, waving her little drawing in her hand. Daddy stepped back immediately. Annie had no idea she'd just walked between a wolf and the rabbit he'd cornered. I forced a smile and put my hand on her shoulder. "Sure, baby. Let's go look." Annie trotted off ahead, talking a mile a minute about unicorns and clouds. I followed her, my knees still weak, my heartbeat pounding behind my ribs. I felt Daddy's eyes on my back the whole way. Later that night, long after everyone else was asleep, I heard something, soft footsteps outside my door. The doorknob jiggled, slow, testing, careful. I held my breath, every part of me frozen. Then another sound, a door opening down the hallway, Annie's door. My heart dropped into my stomach. I didn't think, I didn't breathe. I didn't weigh consequences. I threw my blanket aside, crept into the hallway, and saw a shadow inside her room. And it wasn't hers. I lunged forward so fast I didn't even feel the floor under my feet. "Daddy," I said sharply, louder than I meant to. He spun around. Annie sat up in her small bed, rubbing her eyes, confused. Daddy stared at me, his face unreadable. Cold, calculating, caught. "Nora," he said slowly, "go back to bed." But I didn't move, not an inch. For the first time, he realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was afraid for her. And that moment, that one stand I took, lit a fuse that would explode sooner than I ever imagined. Daddy didn't say a word the moment I caught him standing in Annie's doorway. He just stared at me with this tight, controlled expression, like a man trying to hide the fact he'd been caught doing something he had no business doing. For a second, the whole hallway felt frozen. The rain tapping against the windows, the dim light from the night lamp. Annie still half asleep, blinking up at the both of us. I was just checking on her. Daddy finally muttered, his voice too calm, too rehearsed. "No, you weren't," I said before I could stop myself. His eyes snapped to mine, cold as winter well water. For a moment, I regretted speaking, but something in me, something bigger than fear, refused to back down. He stepped toward me, slow and steady, trying to pull that old authority card he'd used my whole life. "Watch your tone," he whispered. "You don't talk to me like that in my house." Normally, I'd shrink, apologize, fold. But that night, something inside me shifted gears. "This isn't just your house," I whispered back. "We live here too." For the first time in my life, he looked genuinely startled, like he hadn't expected a challenge. A muscle in his jaw twitched. His hands curled slightly, the way they did when he was about to lose his temper. But then he glanced back at Annie, who was still awake and watching us. He stepped away. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said sharply. "Get to bed." Tomorrow. That word haunted me the rest of the night. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for every sound, every step, every shift in the house. My nerves were stretched so thin I felt like one wrong noise would snap me in half. When morning finally came, Daddy acted like his usual self, drinking coffee, flipping the newspaper, pretending nothing had happened. But there was something new in the air, a tension that hummed like an electric wire between us. All day long, I kept Annie right by my side, helping her braid her hair, making her lunch, sitting close while she played with her crayons. Daddy watched us quietly, that calculating look back in his eyes, like he was trying to figure out if I was a threat he needed to control or eliminate. Mama floated through the day in her soft, disconnected way, unaware that our home was slowly becoming a battlefield. By evening, Daddy had decided he wanted a family dinner. A rare event. A strategic event. He cooked, set the table, made everything look picture perfect. But the whole time, his eyes kept cutting toward me, short, sharp glances that tightened my chest. When dinner was done and Mama took Lily to put her down for the night, Daddy stood up slowly and said, "Nora, come with me. We need a talk." Every bone in my body tensed. Because I knew this wasn't about a talk. This was about him trying to reclaim control. And I wasn't sure, this time, that I could walk away unharmed. But before Daddy got the chance to confront me, someone else in the house made a move that changed everything. Daddy motioned for me to follow him into the living room, that same slow, deliberate walk he used whenever he wanted to intimidate someone. My heart thudded hard enough I thought he might hear it, but I forced my face to stay blank. Annie sat at the table, swinging her legs, watching us with big worried eyes. I didn't want her seeing any of this, but I couldn't protect her from everything, not anymore. The living room lamp cast a golden circle across the rug, and Daddy stepped right into the center of it like he was stepping onto a stage. He crossed his arms, stared down at me, and let out this long, disappointed sigh, the kind meant to make you feel small. "We're going to fix your attitude," he said. Nothing in his voice was loud. Sometimes the quiet tone was worse. I don't have an attitude, I answered softly. I'm just trying to look out for Annie. His nostrils flared. You don't get to question where I go in my own house. You don't get to interfere when I'm checking on things. I wanted to scream that I did get to interfere because he wasn't checking on anyone. He was checking if the coast was clear for something he had no right to do. But Mana was in the hallway, humming to Lily, and Annie was close by, and I didn't want either of them pulled into this. Daddy, I whispered, please, just leave her alone. He stepped closer, his expression turning sharp. You think you're grown now? Think you can dictate how this family works? His voice dropped even lower. You forget your place real quick. I didn't back away, not this time. Not when Annie's safety was hanging in the balance. Before he could say anything else, a sound cut through the tension. A small voice from behind us. Daddy? It was Annie, peeking around the kitchen doorway, clutching her rabbit by the ear. She looked scared. Not confused, scared. And Daddy saw it too. He turned quickly, softening his voice in a heartbeat. What are you doing up, sweetheart? Go sit with your mama. But Annie didn't move. She just stared right at me, like she sensed something was wrong, even if she didn't have the words for it. That moment, her standing there in her mismatched pajamas, trembling like a leaf, shifted something inside me. I wasn't just scared anymore. I was angry. Angry that she had to see our father this way. Angry that he didn't even try to hide the ugliness anymore. Something in Daddy's gaze flickered. Not guilt, annoyance. He didn't like witnesses, especially tiny ones who loved too honestly. He stepped away from me, jaw tight. This conversation isn't finished, he said. We'll handle it later. But the way he said later made my skin crawl. When he turned his back to check on Mama, Annie ran straight into my arms. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She could feel the storm brewing. And Daddy, seeing us huddled together, didn't like that one bit. His eyes hardened, his jaw clenched, and I realized he wasn't done trying to break me. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that someone outside our family had already started noticing things, and they were about to step in. The day after that tense showdown in the living room, I walked to school with a knot in my stomach so tight, it felt like I'd swallowed a fist. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that makes you think the world is holding its breath. I didn't sleep much the night before. Every creak in the house had me jolting awake, thinking Daddy was at my door again. But morning came, and with it, a small blessing. Distance. School was the only place I didn't feel hunted. I sat in homeroom staring at the chalkboard when Mrs. Thompson, my English teacher, walked over and crouched beside my desk. She was one of those women who really saw kids. The kind who read you like a book even when you were trying to stay closed. Sweetheart, she whispered, you've been awfully tired lately. Everything okay at home? My throat went tight. I could have lied. I almost did. But the words stuck, not because I wanted to tell the truth, but because the truth was too heavy to put into words, so I just nodded. A lie. A quiet, desperate lie. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. She laid a soft hand on my shoulder and said, if you ever need anything, anything at all, you come to me. You hear? I nodded again, this time swallowing hard. It was the first time in weeks I felt someone was genuinely looking out for me. What I didn't know was that Mrs. Thompson had already been paying attention. She'd noticed the way I flinched when someone walked behind me. The way I kept long sleeves on even when it was warm. The way my smile never quite reached my eyes anymore. Later that afternoon, after final bell, I was packing my books when she approached me again. You're staying late for tutoring today, right? She asked. I hadn't signed up for tutoring. But I understood immediately. She wanted an excuse to talk without anyone else around. Yes, ma'am, I said. We stayed in her classroom while the rest of the school emptied out. She handed me a worksheet, but neither of us touched it. "I need you to know," she said gently, "you're not alone. Something is weighing on you. I can see it." Her words cracked something inside me. Tears pooled in my eyes, but I blinked them back fast. I wasn't ready. Not yet. The moment I said anything, everything at home would explode. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She just said, "I'm here when you're ready." Before leaving, she told me, "If anything ever scares you, if you ever feel unsafe, come straight to me or the office. Don't wait." I walked home with her words echoing in my head. Could I really tell someone? Would anyone believe me? When I turned onto our street, I froze. Daddy's truck was already parked crooked in the driveway. He was home early, and he was standing on the porch with his arms crossed, watching me walk up like he'd been waiting. His face was tight, angry, suspicious. "School let out an hour ago," he said slowly. "Where were you, Nora?" My blood ran cold. He wasn't asking. He was accusing. And the moment I opened my mouth to answer, Daddy revealed something that made my heart drop straight into my shoes. Daddy stood on the porch like a man carved out of stone, his boots planted wide, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck twitched. Rain clouds gathered overhead, casting everything in a darker shade of gray. I felt small walking toward him, like every step brought me closer to something I didn't want to face. "School let out at 3, he repeated, voice low. "It's almost 4. You want to try again?" My throat tightened. I stayed for tutoring." He narrowed his eyes, studying my face like he was searching for the lie he was convinced he'd find. "Tutoring," he said slowly. "Funny. I called the school earlier. They said you weren't on any tutoring list." My heart dropped. Of course he called. Of course he checked. Daddy wasn't the type to trust anything he couldn't control, and lately, he felt like he was losing control. "I was helping Mrs. Thompson clean up," I stammered. "She asked if I could stay. Don't lie to me." He stepped forward, and even though he wasn't shouting, the quietness of his tone made it worse. I swallowed hard. "I'm not lying. She wanted to talk to me." "Talk about what?" he snapped. Where no one could hear. I don't know. Homework." He stared at me a long time, like he could peel the truth off my skin. Finally, he leaned in close and said in a low voice meant for my ears alone, "I don't like people poking around in my house. That woman better mind her business, and you better not give her a reason to ask any more questions." I felt the threat wrapped in every word. Inside the house, Mama was humming softly while folding laundry, unaware of the storm brewing on the porch. Annie was on the living room floor, coloring again. Lily babbled in her playpen. The normalcy of the scene felt cruel, like life was pretending to be peaceful when everything was boiling under the surface. That evening, Daddy hovered near me more than usual. If I walked into the kitchen, he followed. If I went to check on Lily, he watched from the doorway. If I sat with Annie, he paced nearby, pretending to fix things, pretending not to stare. He wanted to remind me he was there, watching, waiting, measuring how much truth I might spill. Later, after bedtime, I heard something that chilled me more than anything he'd said. Daddy was in the kitchen whispering to Mama, his tone sharp, hers confused. "He's talking about taking Nora out of school," Mama said in a trembling voice. "She's getting mouthy," Daddy growled. "Nosy people poking around. She needs more time at home." Home, the last place I felt safe. He wanted me trapped where no one could see what was happening, where no one could notice the fear, where no one could ask questions. I sat on the top stair, hands shaking, realizing Daddy wasn't just dangerous anymore. He was planning. And the very next day, the person I least expected stepped in and saw something that changed everything. The next morning started like any other, but something in the air felt charged, like the whole house was holding its breath. Daddy was acting sweeter than usual, making pancakes, humming like he didn't have a single dark thought in his head. That was always the worst version of him, the calm, polite one, the one planning something. Mama sat at the table, tired eyes blinking slowly, sipping her coffee without really tasting it. Annie talking about some story she'd written at school, swinging her legs under the chair. I sat quietly, pushing pancakes around my plate, swallowing hard every time Daddy glanced at me. He'd been watching me since sunrise. When it was time to leave, Daddy said he'd drive me to school. It wasn't a request. It was an order wrapped in a smile. My stomach nodded. The drive was silent, except for the rumble of the old truck. Every now and then, he tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, like he was thinking through a checklist only he knew. When we pulled up to the school, he grabbed my wrist before I could step out. "You remember what I told you," he said quietly. "No talking, no stories, no funny business. Keep our family matters in this family." I nodded, jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. He let go, and I walked inside. But my hand shook for several minutes afterward. Halfway through first period, Mrs. Thompson asked to see me in the hallway. She closed the door behind her gently, like she didn't want to startle me. "Nora," she said, "I'm sorry if I overstepped yesterday, but I need to know, are you safe at home?" Her words hit like a punch to the chest. My eyes burned, but I blinked fast, refusing to let anything spill. I didn't want to break down in the middle of the hallway where anyone could walk by. "I'm fine," I whispered, staring at the floor. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Sweetheart, someone noticed something this morning." My head snapped up. "Who?" I asked, confused. She hesitated. "Mr. Caldwell, the bus driver. He said he saw your dad holding your arm outside the house. Said it looked forceful. He mentioned seeing the same thing once last week." My heart dropped. Someone had seen. Someone outside the family. And they were paying attention. Mrs. Thompson continued, "When adults see patterns, they have to ask questions. And Nora, we're concerned." Concerned. The word echoed in my ears. "Nothing's wrong," I insisted. But my voice cracked. "It's just, Daddy gets strict sometimes. That's all." She didn't buy it. Not for a second. She softened her gaze and said, "Nora, people don't get concerned over strict parenting. They get concerned when a child looks scared." My breath hitched. Before I could answer, the assistant principal walked down the hallway. He paused when he saw me, like he'd been looking for me. "Nora, I need a quick word," he said. My stomach dropped into my shoes. Why was the assistant principal looking for me? He motioned toward his office. Mrs. Thompson touched my shoulder gently, silently saying, "Go on." And as I walked toward that office, my heart pounded with one terrifying thought. Daddy's worst fear was coming true. Someone else was starting to see through the cracks. But I had no idea that what the assistant principal wanted to discuss was something that would turn my entire world completely upside down. Walking into the assistant principal's office felt like walking into a courtroom where I didn't know if I was the witness or the one on trial. Mr. Harris, a tall man with kind eyes and a tired face, closed the door gently after I sat down. He didn't sit behind his big desk like normal. He pulled a chair right in front of me and sat eye level, which somehow made everything scarier. "Nora," he began softly, "I'm not here to get you in trouble. I need you to understand that." My hands twisted in my lap. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. He paused, studying my expression with the kind of concern that made my stomach flip. "We've noticed some things, your teachers, staff, even the bus driver. And before we move forward, I want to hear from you." "I'm fine," I said quickly, almost too quickly. He nodded slowly, like he expected that answer. Sometimes kids say they're fine even when everything inside them is shaking. I swallowed hard. He continued, "Your teacher mentioned you've been tired, withdrawn, jumping when someone walks behind you. And today when the bus driver came in early, he said something that worried us." I barely breathed as he continued. "He said when he drove by your house, he saw your father gripping your arm, hard." Mr. Harris leaned in slightly. "He said you looked afraid." I froze. That small moment on the porch, something I thought nobody saw, had been witnessed. It wasn't. He didn't. My thoughts tangled up. If I defended Daddy too strongly, they'd think I was lying. If I said too much, he'd explode at home. I was trapped between danger on both sides. Mr. Harris didn't push. He just waited, patiently, like he had all day. Finally, he said, "Nora, we care about you. That's why we're talking. But I need you to be honest with me. Has anything happened at home that's making you feel unsafe?" The word unsafe hit me in the chest like a stone. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. Tears pricked the back of my eyes, but I blinked them away. Crying felt dangerous, like if I started, everything I'd been holding inside would come pouring out. "I can't," I whispered. "I can't talk about it." He lowered his voice even more. "Why not?" I squeezed my hands together until my knuckles ached. "Because if I do, everything will get worse." Mr. Harris exhaled slowly, like he'd heard that same sentence from too many scared kids before me. "You won't be alone," he said. "If something is happening, we will help you. We will keep you safe." Safe. That word felt foreign, like something meant for other people, not for me. Before he could say anything else, there was a knock at the office door. The school secretary stepped inside with a pale face. "Mr. Harris, Nora's father is here asking to take her home early." My entire body went cold.
He was here. He knew I'd talked to someone, or he suspected, and he wasn't going to wait until the end of the school day. Mr. Harris stood up slowly, his jaw tightening. "Well," he said quietly, "that changes things. Because when Daddy walked into that office, he didn't come alone. And what he said next shook everyone in that room." Daddy filled the doorway of the office like a shadow swallowing the light behind him. His face was carved into that tight, polite expression he used for church and public places, the one that hid every ugly thing underneath. But his eyes were locked on me with a coldness that made my whole body tense. "Afternoon," he said to Mr. Harris, forcing a smile too wide to be real. "I'm here to pick up my daughter. Family matters." My stomach twisted. Those two words, family matters, held a different meaning to him than to anyone else in the room. Mr. Harris didn't budge. "Mr. Carter, we're actually in the middle of a conversation with Nora. I'd appreciate a moment." Daddy stepped inside, shutting the door behind him with a quiet click that felt like a trap closing. "With all due respect," he said, "I don't need the school questioning how I raise my children. My girl knows the rules. She's coming home." He looked at me again, and even though he kept a smile on his lips, his eyes were giving orders. "Don't open your mouth. Don't embarrass me. Don't you dare tell them anything." Mr. Harris stood up straighter, placing himself slightly between us. "Actually, we have a duty to check on students when concerns are raised. Nora isn't leaving until I'm confident she's safe." Daddy chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Safe? She's like daughter. Of course she's safe." His tone was friendly enough for someone who didn't know him. But I did. Every syllable dripped with warning. That's when someone else stepped into the office. Mrs. Thompson. She didn't even knock. She walked in with her shoulders squared and a firmness I'd never seen in her. "Mr. Carter," she said calmly, "we need a few minutes with Nora. Alone." Daddy's jaw twitched. He didn't like being told no, especially by women, especially in front of witnesses. "I don't think you understand," he began. But she cut him off. "No, sir, you don't understand. When a student shows signs of distress, we're obligated by law to follow up. You can wait in the main office while we finish." Daddy stared her down, calculating. I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. He wanted to explode, wanted to snatch me up and march me out of the building. But he also knew too many eyes were on him, too many adults, too many mandatory reporters. So he forced a stiff smile and said, "Fine, but I'm not leaving this school without her." He jabbed a finger toward me before walking out. "We'll settle this in the truck." My breath hitched. Settling things in the truck never meant talking. It meant consequences. It meant payback served behind closed doors where nobody could hear. As soon as the door shut, my knees went weak. Mrs. Thompson sat beside me, her voice gentle but firm. "Nora, you don't have to go with him if you're afraid." Afraid. Hearing someone else say the word broke something inside me. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Mr. Harris leaned forward. "If you tell us what's happening, even a little, we can protect you. But we need the truth." I opened my mouth, once, twice, but no words came out. My throat locked up. Everything I wanted to confess tangled into knots. Then, for the first time, I whispered something I had never said out loud. "I don't feel safe going home." The room went still. Mr. Harris and Mrs. Thompson exchanged a look, a serious one. And just like that, a line had been crossed. A truth spoken. A door opened that couldn't be shut again. But telling them I wasn't safe was only the beginning. Because what Daddy did next pushed the school into emergency action. When the words, "I don't feel safe going home," left my mouth, it felt like the floor shifted under my feet. I didn't shout it. I didn't cry it. I whispered it, barely audible, like the words were afraid of themselves. But for the adults in the room, it was loud enough to change everything. Mrs. Thompson gently squeezed my hand. Mr. Harris exhaled slowly, the decision already firming in his eyes. "Thank you for telling us," he said. "You did the right thing." I wasn't sure it felt like the right thing. My heart hammered in my chest, and fear crawled up my spine. I kept picturing Daddy pacing in the main office, wearing that tight, fake smile, wondering what I was saying behind closed doors, planning what he'd do once he got me alone. Mr. Harris walked to the phone on his desk. "I'm contacting the counselor and the school officer. We'll follow protocol." Protocol. A word I'd only ever heard in movies. Now it was my lifeline. Mrs. Thompson stayed with me, rubbing small circles on my back. "You're not in trouble, Nora. You're protected." Protected. Another word that felt too big for me. After a minute, the school resource officer, Officer Daniels, stepped into the room. He was a steady-looking man, not too tall, not intimidating. But his presence filled the space with something solid, something safe. "Nora," he said gently, sitting across from me, "we're here to make sure nothing happens to you today. Your dad is out there, but you're not going anywhere with him until we're sure everything's okay." My pulse thudded in my ears. Daddy was going to be furious. Not just mad, dangerous. The officer asked a few questions, nothing invasive, nothing overwhelming. Just things like, "Has anyone at home hurt you? Are you scared he'll be angry if you don't leave with him? Has anyone threatened you?" My voice trembled. He gets angry. He says things. When he wants, "I need you to stay right here," the officer said. "I'm going to speak to your father." My chest tightened. "He'll be mad." "He can be mad," Officer Daniel said, "but he won't be near you." He left the room and Mrs. Thompson shut the door behind him. Through the small window in the office door, I saw Daddy standing with his arms crossed, impatience radiating off him like heat from a stove. The moment the officer approached him, Daddy plastered on that warm, neighborly smile, the kind he used at church picnics. Even from across the hallway, I could see his charm at work. The friendly gestures, the easy shrug, the concerned parent routine. But then something happened I didn't expect. For the first time, Daddy's smile dropped, his face tightened, and he jabbed a finger toward the office where I was sitting. Officer Daniels didn't flinch, their voices didn't carry, but the tension did. Daddy's jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists, and for the first time, the officer stepped between him and the door. Mrs. Thompson leaned closer to me, whispering, "No matter what happens out there, you are not going home with him today." Tears welled in my eyes, not just fear now, but relief so strong it almost hurt. Something was shifting. The truth was no longer locked inside me. But Daddy wasn't a man who backed down easily, and what he did next forced the school to make a decision that changed the course of my entire life. Daddy had always been good at putting on a performance. He could charm a whole room with a handshake and a smile. Make folks believe he was the kind of man who'd give you the shirt off his back. But inside that school hallway, with Officer Daniels blocking his path, the mask started slipping. I watched through the small office window as Daddy leaned in close to the officer, his voice sharp and controlled. Even though I couldn't hear the words, I recognized the look. The tight jaw, the stiff shoulders, the little tick under his left eye. He was furious. Officer Daniels didn't step aside, didn't smile, didn't bow to Daddy's intimidation the way everyone else in town usually did. That alone seemed to push Daddy past a limit. He suddenly raised his voice, just enough for the office to catch bits and pieces. "This is ridiculous. She's my daughter. You got no right, none, to keep her from me." His outburst drew attention. The secretary peeked her head out of her office. A teacher passing by slowed her steps. 2 students lingered near the end of the hall before being shooed away. Daddy hated that. Hated eyes on him. Hated people seeing the cracks in his perfect image. Officer Daniels held up a steady hand. "Sir, lower your voice. We're not discussing this in front of students." "I'll raise my voice anywhere I damn well please," Daddy snapped. Then he pointed at our office door, right at me. "That girl is coming home with me, now." My hands shook, my breath caught. Mrs. Thompson stepped closer, as if she felt my fear from across the room. Officer Daniels' tone hardened. "Mr. Carter, let me be clear. You will not enter that office. You will not take her anywhere. We have concerns. Until we sort this out, she stays here." Daddy took a step forward. The officer stepped forward too. The tension felt like a rubber band stretched near breaking. Then, something changed. Something subtle but powerful. Daddy looked around and realized how many people were watching. Too many witnesses. Too many adults. Too many mandatory reporters. He froze. It wasn't fear of the law. It wasn't fear for me. It was fear of losing control of his image. He straightened his posture, smoothed his shirt sleeve, and put on that calm facade again. "I see what's happening here," he said, voice steady but icy. "You've all poisoned her mind. She's a good girl. She'd never talk back unless someone put ideas in her head." Mrs. Thompson stepped out of the office then, standing firmly next to the officer. "No one put ideas in her head," she said. She spoke for herself. Daddy's gaze darkened. "Nora knows better than to embarrass her family." Those words cut through me. They weren't loud, but they held the weight of a threat I knew too well. Officer Daniels crossed his arms. "This conversation is over. You can wait outside. A social worker has been contacted." The moment Daddy heard the words social worker, his eyes snapped wide with something like panic. Not for me, but for what might come out about him. He took a step back, shaking his head. "You're all making a mistake," he said. "A big one. But for the first time," his voice cracked. He left the building, door slamming behind him. My breaths came quicker, shoulders trembling. Mrs. Thompson wrapped an arm around me, whispering, "You're safe. He can't get to you here. Not today." But in my chest, fear and relief clashed so hard I felt dizzy. Everything was changing, fast, and there was no going back. What I didn't know was, Daddy wasn't leaving to cool off. He was leaving to do something that forced the authorities to intervene faster than anyone expected. The moment Daddy stormed out of the school building, the whole atmosphere shifted. It was like someone finally acknowledged the tornado hovering over my life. Still, with Officer Daniels guarding the hallway and Mrs. Thompson at my side, my stomach churned with dread. Daddy didn't just leave when he was angry. He left when he was planning. I sat in the office chair, hands trembling in my lap. Mr. Harris stepped out briefly to speak with the front desk, and Mrs. Thompson stayed right beside me, refusing to let me sit alone. "You didn't do anything wrong," she kept saying softly. "Remember that." But my mind wasn't steady enough to believe her. Not yet. About 10 minutes later, the secretary rushed toward the office with worry etched across her face. "Mr. Harris," she called. "The police station just phoned. It's about Mr. Carter." My stomach dropped so hard I thought I'd be sick. Officer Daniels stepped closer. "What happened?" The secretary swallowed, glancing at me before answering carefully. He made a scene outside, yelling, pacing, arguing with one of the parking lot attendants. Someone called it in." Of course he did. Daddy never went quietly, not when he felt cornered. Officer Daniels exhaled sharply. "All right, I'll handle this. Keep Nora away from any windows. Any windows." My heart thudded harder. He left to talk with the responding officers outside. Through the office door's tiny glass pane, I saw blue lights flashing faintly across the hallway walls, reflecting from the parking lot. Mrs. Thompson shut the blinds just enough so I couldn't see out. "It's okay," she whispered, even though she looked shaken herself. "You're protected right now." Mr. Harris returned a moment later, skimming over paperwork with tight, focused movements. "The social worker is already on her way," he said. "This situation just accelerated." Accelerated. Another sharp word that made the room tilt slightly. What's going to happen?" I finally asked, my voice hoarse. Mrs. Thompson turned to me with the kindest, saddest eyes. "Right now, our job is to keep you safe. Nothing else matters." Minutes later, though it felt like hours, a woman in a navy blazer entered the office. She introduced herself as Miss Randall, the district's child services worker. She had a calm presence, not too soft, but not harsh either, like someone who'd walked into too many painful situations, but stayed gentle anyway. "Hi, Nora," she said with a small smile. "I'm here to talk with you and make sure you're okay." Behind her, Officer Daniels re-entered, his expression serious. "Nora, he might be, but right now, we're worried about you." My eyes welled with tears. I couldn't blink back this time, because for the first time in my life, someone wasn't protecting him. They were protecting me. But nothing prepared me for the moment Miss Randall asked the question, the one that forced me to speak the truth out loud for the very first time. Miss Randall pulled a chair in front of me, close enough that I could see the faint scuff marks on her shoes. She wasn't rushed. She wasn't dramatic. She just looked at me like someone ready to hear whatever truth I'd been swallowing for years. "Nora," she said gently, "before we go any further, I need to ask you something, and you can take your time. You don't have to answer fast. You don't have to explain everything. Just answer honestly." I swallowed hard. My hands were shaking in my lap. She took a slow breath. "Do you feel unsafe because of something happening inside your home, or because of someone in your home?" Her words dropped into the quiet room like a stone hitting deep water. My chest tightened. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask for details. She asked the one question that forced the truth out from where I'd buried it. My throat felt like it was closing. I stared at my shoes, at the floor, anywhere but her face. Then, in the smallest, trembling whisper, I answered, "Someone in my home." The room went still. Not shocked, not dramatic. Just still, like they were holding space for me. Ms. Randall nodded slowly, not pushing, not reacting too hard. "Thank you," she said. "You're very brave." Brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt like a scared kid who finally said something she should have said years ago. She continued softly, "Is that person your father?" My breath hitched. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But the way my eyes filled, the way my shoulders folded in, said everything. Mrs. Thompson placed a gentle hand on my back. Mr. Hillis quietly shut the blinds fully, closing off the hallway view. Officer Daniels stepped closer, not looming, but present. Ms. Randall leaned forward. "Nora, you're not going home today." Those 5 words hit harder than anything else because they didn't come from fear. They came from protection. "We're arranging a safe placement for you tonight," she continued. "A place where your dad can't get to you. A place where you can breathe." My mind spun. "What about Annie and Mama and Lily?" I whispered, panic rising. "We'll check on them too," she promised. "But right now, we need to focus on your safety first." I wiped my eyes with the back of my sleeve. "Daddy's going to be mad." Miss Randall shook her head. "He doesn't get to decide anything today." That was the first time anyone had ever said that, out loud in front of other adults. And hearing it felt like a door unlocking inside me. Officer Daniels' radio crackled. He stepped aside to listen, then returned with a firm expression. "We need to move," he said. "Child Services wants her transported off campus before her father circles back." Circles back. Those 2 words tightened my entire chest. Mrs. Thompson looked at me with so much warmth, it almost broke me. "Nora, you're not alone. Not anymore." And for the first time, I believed her. But as they prepared to take me somewhere safe, something happened outside the school doors. Something that turned a simple extraction into a full-blown emergency. They moved fast after that, faster than my mind could keep up with. Officer Daniels quietly radioed for backup while Ms. Randall gathered her notes and Mr. Harris secured the office door. The shift in the air was immediate. It wasn't panic. It was preparation. A controlled urgency that told me they'd done this before, and they knew exactly what kind of danger we were dealing with. "Grab your backpack, sweetheart," Ms. Randall said gently. "We're leaving through a side exit." My hands shook as I stood, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I felt like a balloon stretched too thin. One wrong move, and I'd burst. As we headed toward the back hallway, a faint commotion echoed from the front of the school. Voices. A slamming door. Then Daddy's voice. Loud, sharp, uncontrolled. "No one's keeping her from me! You hear me? Nobody!" The words ricocheted through the hallway like a warning shot. I froze mid-step, breath caught in my throat. "He came back," I whispered. Officer Daniels placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Keep moving, don't look back." But I heard back. Daddy's boots pounding across the main lobby. The front office staff trying to talk him down. His voice rising, higher and higher. That same dangerous tone I knew too well. "Nora!" he shouted. "Nora! Get out here right now." My blood ran cold. Miss Randall gently but firmly pulled me forward. "Don't turn around. Eyes on me. Keep going." My feet moved, but my mind was spiraling. He sounded furious. He sounded desperate. He sounded like a man who felt his control slipping through his fingers. As we reached the side exit, 2 additional officers met us there, Officer Pierce and Officer Delgado. They stood guard like walls made of steel. "Car's ready," Pierce said. "Let's move." But just as we pushed through the door into the covered walkway outside, a voice boomed through the parking lot, closer than it should have been. "Where is she?" I didn't have to see him to know. Daddy had come around the building. Miss Randall stepped in front of me instinctively. Officer Daniels moved between us and the direction of the voice. "Get her in the car," he ordered. Everything turned into a blur, a flash of movement, shouting, footsteps pounding toward us, other footsteps intercepting, doors slamming, radios crackling. Officer Delgado grabbed my hand. "Come on, honey, into the car."
He opened the back door of the unmarked cruiser just as Daddy's silhouette appeared across the lot, storming toward us like a man possessed. His voice ripped through the air. "That's my daughter, you can't take her." I scrambled into the back seat, heart in my throat. Officer Pierce shut the door firmly. Miss Randall slid in beside me, keeping her arm around my shoulders. You're okay. Just breathe." But Daddy didn't stop. He lunged toward the car, only to be restrained by 2 officers, shouting and struggling as they held him back. I watched through the window, tears blurring everything. The man who terrified me for years was finally being stopped by someone other than me. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel safe yet, but it felt like the beginning of something I never dared to imagine. Freedom. But leaving the school was only the first step, because the place they took me next held truths about my family I wasn't prepared to hear. The car ride away from the school felt unreal, like I was floating outside my own body, watching everything happen from a distance. Ms. Randall sat beside me in the back seat, her arm wrapped around my shoulders with a steadiness I didn't know how much I needed until that moment. Officer Pierce drove, eyes sharp on the road, while Officer Delgado followed behind us in a second cruiser. Every turn we took felt like another thread snapping between me and my old life. "We're taking you to the County Child Services building," Ms. Randall explained softly. "It's safe, secure. Your father won't be able to get near you." I nodded, but a knot in my chest tightened anyway. I wasn't just scared of him showing up. I was scared of what came next, where I'd sleep, who I'd live with, what would happen to Mama, and Annie, and baby Lily. When we pulled into a small brick building with a blue flag out front, the parking lot was nearly empty. Officer Delgado met us at the entrance, scanning the area before giving a nod. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and old paperwork. A receptionist greeted Miss Randall with a knowing look, like she'd been expecting us. They moved me quickly into a small room with 2 couches, a box of tissues, and a tiny table with coloring books. It was meant to be comforting, I guess, but I felt like I was standing on a cliff, waiting to see if the ground beneath me would hold. Miss Randall sat across from me, folder in hand. "Honey, before we decide where you'll go for the night, I need to explain something." My hands folded tightly in my lap. Is Daddy in jail?" She shook her head gently. "No. He's been escorted off campus with a warning to stay away, but nothing permanent has happened yet." My heart sank. Part of me, maybe the smallest part, still hoped things would magically fix themselves. But the bigger part, the part that had lived in fear for too long, felt disappointment. Fear, confusion. "What about Mama?" I whispered. "She'll fall apart. And Annie, she's just a kid. She doesn't know what's happening." Ms. Randall took a slow breath. "That's what we need to talk about. This isn't just about you anymore." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She opened her folder. "When the officers tried to calm your father at the school, he said some things that raised red flags." My chest tightened. "What things?" She hesitated, not because she wanted to hide anything, but because she wanted to say it gently. "He mentioned that he's been dealing with issues at home for years, that he keeps the family in line because no one else will. And when the officers pressed him on what he meant," she exhaled, "he got defensive. Too defensive." My stomach twisted. "Because of that," she continued, The county has to open an investigation on the entire household. I felt like the floor dropped out beneath me. The whole household? I whispered. Yes, she said softly. Meaning we have to check on your mother, Annie, and Lily too. A tear slipped down my cheek, not from sadness, but from the sudden, overwhelming weight of responsibility. I didn't want them dragged into this, I choked. Ms. Randall's voice softened further. Honey, they were already in it. You just finally spoke loud enough for someone to hear. I covered my face with my hands. Everything felt too big, too heavy, too fast. But then Ms. Randall leaned closer and said something that felt like a lifeline thrown into deep water. You didn't start this, Nora. You just stopped it from going any further. But before the night was over, I was about to learn a devastating truth about Mama. One that changed how I saw everything that happened in our home. Street lights blinked on one by one. I sat curled on the edge of the couch, clutching a tissue so tightly it was crumpled into a tiny ball in my fist. Ms. Randall returned with 2 cups of hot chocolate, one for her, one for me. I didn't feel thirsty, but the warmth in my hands steadied my breathing. She sat down across from me again. Nora, we heard back from the officers who went to check on your mom. My heart sank. I'd been waiting for this, dreading this. How is she? I whispered. Ms. Randall took a quiet breath, one of those breaths adults take when they're about to say something they wish they didn't have to. She wasn't surprised, she said softly. I blinked, confused. What? She wasn't shocked that the school called. She wasn't surprised your father caused a scene. She wasn't even startled when the officers mentioned you felt unsafe. The words cut deep, sharper than I expected. She knew? My voice cracked. She knew and she didn't say anything? Ms. Randall reached for the tissue box and set it closer to me. Honey, she's been scared for a long time too. Those words hit me like a punch. She told the officers she's been trying to keep the peace, Ms. Randall continued. She said she didn't know how to stop what was happening without making things worse. A tear slid down my cheek. She said that? I whispered. She did. Ms. Randall leaned forward. Her voice warm but firm. She wasn't protecting him. She was surviving. But surviving isn't the same as keeping you kids safe. I stared at the carpet, memories flashing through my mind like broken film. Mama's tired eyes. Her hushed warnings. Her way of stepping between us and Daddy when she could, and looking away when she couldn't. I felt angry and sad and confused, all at once. Is she okay now? I asked. For tonight, she's staying with Annie and Lily at a relative's house, Miss Randall explained. Someplace quiet, someplace safe. Officers will check in again. I let out a shaky breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Are we ever going home again? I asked finally. Miss Randall looked me straight in the eyes, not sugarcoating, not dodging. Not until it's safe, she said. And that might take a long time. The words were heavy, but they were real. And for the first time in my life, real felt better than pretending. She placed a hand over mine. Tonight, you'll stay with an emergency foster family. They're good people, kind. They'll take care of you while we figure out the next steps. I nodded slowly, tears dripping onto my jeans. I wasn't going home, but maybe that wasn't the loss I thought it was. Maybe it was the beginning. Miss Randall handed me my small backpack. Ready? I stood up, not steady, not fearless, but stronger than I had been that morning. As we walked out of the room and into a future I never expected, I realized something. Speaking up didn't break my family. Silence was already doing that. My voice just gave us a chance to rebuild.